Okay, we're switching. We gotta switch.
We're already working. Working. It's up. It's been up.
I mean, it's a hard up, or is it like
hard up.
back and forth?
Nope, it's up.
And the sound?
Simon, did you get audio?
Yeah, where's the sound working?
Okay, you gotta switch. So I'm gonna send you the link for this.
It's not. It's coming in and out. And it's there.
It's not.
Ryan, do you want to come out here and see it?
Where's my sound? You can't hear.
If you can't hear it, there's no noise.
Okay.
Short people start coming.
No.
Tell them to get you one.
No, they're not going.
Don't train me.
And
So you're not on Zoom?
Not now, then we're possible we're running.
Okay. Yep.
I don't think so. They're still working on it. Oh, that's really
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Don't walk. Now it's working.
Is it internet issues?
Yes.
You boarded the video that doesn't say that we have how many minutes left?
Nope. Can you give me more audio? Is that everything?
Is that
Okay.
you've got nice sound again?
So we're doing your Facebook thing, or can we push to your computer? Because this is...
I think Zoom is the problem. It's not your computer. I think Zoom.
Can we tell all the guests to get off the Wi-Fi?
Yes. Turn off your Wi-Fi. Turn off your Wi-Fi.
Do you want me to make
It's really close, though. Like it's struggling.
Simon, what's your email address?
SIT.
SIT. I got it.
That's sexy.
Is it someone talking to you?
Yeah, we need to go through a few of these people.
I've said to you, but they
It looks
don't.
like- I thought it was automatically. It's like,
No. We can't have that. That's not.
Whoever's the applicant can go.
No, that's weird.
okay, so Facebook Live is running and it's great. I would suggest we just go to Facebook
Yeah,
Live.
I'm not in there now to do it because I just come on, so.
Are you sure it's not so?
I can send it out to mine also.
I mean, we can put it on the chat to that whole Zoom group, right?
Yeah.
So,
Ryan, your moderator, you have to mute.
I got it.
No, he is listening. That's my fault.
wait, so are we
what are-
doing this or not? I mean, are we going to Facebook or are we not?
I'm gonna leave it to my son to make that call.
We're gonna have to go.
Yeah, but audio, we're gonna have to move. We have to do it.
What
So
time?
I would say.
Because I don't want
So-
it to happen in the middle.
Can, on the Facebook, can we stream videos as planned?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can just do it.
Yeah, and you give me the issues.
Okay, so you
No, we're not switching computers. We're gonna run it from my computer.
We don't have videos.
We do have videos, yes.
And we have videos. I'm leaving this for, I don't know.
So I'm live right now, Simon.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go play the video.
Come with me to Kathmandu is my invitation to you to meet with 12 incredible women who tell the most astonishing stories of God's goodness. Nepal is one of the most remote yet stunning countries, and its capital Kathmandu is vibrant yet impoverished and steeped in both Hinduism and Buddhism. I'd love you to get to know the women who live here. I've written about women with leprosy, mental health problems, and some that are too poor even to afford rice. One of the women is the mother of a human trafficking victim, which I believe is a unique perspective not told anywhere else. Another lady has made her fortune twice, only to lose it. Had she been born elsewhere, she'd be a millionaire by now. God has drawn each of these women to himself through dreams, miracles, and sometimes by speaking in an audible voice. Through his power and love, the women have overcome their difficulties, and I hope their testimonies will inspire you. They'll also provide you with a well-informed perspective so you can pray for other women in similar situations. I would love for you to meet these precious women. Please come with me to Kathmandu.
Hi Rachel, thank you for chatting to me today. So I have
Of things. First, that Anna wrote a book, but it's not a book set in Belgium, which is where we are now. It's not a British book about British people. It's not an American book about American people. It is a book about some lovely ladies in Nepal and their stories. So today we're going to talk about this book. We're going to celebrate it and launch it at the end of our hour together. And we're going to get to know Anna a little bit as well. So, Anna, tell us a little bit about yourself. What led you to write this book?
Well, I suppose I developed a passion for Nepal since the age of 11. I had a pen pal in India, and I was fortunate enough when I was at university to go and visit my pen pal in India, and so I just from that point fell in love with South Asia and that part of the world. And then when Simon had the opportunity to go there with the Gurkhas, I was only, I think we were 25, 26 at the time, and we got the call to say we're going to Nepal when our son was only 10 days old. And since then I've just loved Nepal. And so writing this book is my opportunity to share my love for Nepal and the people there with others.
Now, before this book was a reality, though, your life has taken you in a lot of different places. You just said that you've been fascinated with Nepal, South Asia area since you were 11. But let's back up a little bit, because we are live streaming through some device somewhere, like 3 different platforms where we are out there though, and there are people that we should say hi to. So before we talk more about the book, let's say hi to some people who are watching. Who would you like to say hi to?
Yeah, so there's a huge group in Huntsville, Alabama, who are watching and I think eating pastries and coffee at the same time, so hi to them. Thank you very much to Mission Driven Research. They've provided the breakfast for that. I've got friends obviously and family back in the UK. My children should be watching, so hi to them. And then folks in Nepal, not quite staying up late, it's 8:15 at the moment, probably 8:30 by now. So hi to folks in Nepal. And everybody else I've missed, hi to you. I sort of feel like I'm doing an Oscar speech, but everybody else, hi.
Well, if you're doing that, you have to thank your mother. So.
Yeah, thanks Mum, she's watching too. She's one of the trustees, I should really probably thank her.
Oh, thank you, Anna's mom. And to those of you in Alabama, say hi to the Waffle House for us. We don't miss it because we've only been there once, but it's a place. So before we get into the next question, there is a chat box in Facebook. I think that's what we're on. We're on Facebook. So if you would like to ask any questions throughout this time together, if any questions pop into your head, please put them in the chat box. And Simon is going to screen them and then give them to us at the end. So please do that. So the book is out. How do you feel right now?
Nervous, but I'm glad it's got underway. So I'm very thankful to the tech guys here who've been working around the clock to fix this and get this going. So thank you guys. Yeah, excited. It's going to happen.
Yes. So we start back to 2004. Let's go backward a little bit. How did you find yourself in Nepal the first time?
Yes, as I said, Simon got the call when Zach was still only 10 days old to say that we were going out to Nepal. Sorry. And we've got a little bit of feedback here. That's what put me off. So I ended up in Nepal. I think I was 26 at the time, 25 when we went out there. And I went out there quite unprepared, really. I knew there was a lot of poverty there. But if I'd gone out there as a missionary, I would have been going there to do something useful. And I would have had a purpose to be there myself. Obviously, I was accompanying Simon, but I really had no purpose. And so when I arrived and found myself in Kathmandu surrounded by all of these people who were clearly struggling and just had such hard lives and such poverty, it was a shock to the system. And so I began praying and asking God, you know, what his plans were for these people. And at the same time, a lady called Eileen was also praying. And she had about 10 people at that time who were former leprosy patients or they'd lost their spouse to leprosy, and she was paying with her own money and providing them with their rent and their medical bills. And Eileen was 80 years old at this time, and she was worried about what would happen to these 10 when she passed on. So she prayed to God, and God told her somebody from the British camp would help, and I was praying, how should I be helping? And so the two of us kind of met up and came together. And that was the start of Women Without Roofs. And really, I had no idea what I was getting into. I just thought I was going to help 10 people. But the needs were so great, it just grew quite quickly. And then we became a registered charity.
So tell us more about the ministry first.
Mm-hmm.
So give us the details of that.
Okay, so we help women who are on their own. They have to be abandoned for some reason, and generally they fall into 3 categories. So there's fairly young girls who've got themselves pregnant and then the guy has disappeared. We have quite a lot of women who are usually in their 30s, they have 2 or 3 children, and the husband disappears because he doesn't like to provide for them. And then we have widows. And the widows actually can be any age, so there's quite a few elderly widows, but there's also some young widows, and they are particularly impoverished because when their husband dies, they've usually been trying to get him better from whatever is wrong with him. So if he's got cancer, they've spent all their money trying to cure the cancer, and then when he eventually dies, they're left in a heap of debt, as well as losing their breadwinner. So those are particularly vulnerable women, and they're the 3 groups that we help. So we pay rent and medical bills, and usually that's enough to get the women back on their feet. They still need to work to pay for food and clothing, but that's good because that gives them a reason to get up in the morning and gives them a focus. And then we have got some other women with mental health problems and who are particularly elderly, and we pay them some subsistence so they can live, they don't need to work. We have 2 women's homes as well, and then women with children get a little bit extra to pay for schooling, so they get an amount per child.
So you've been useful since 2004.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah,
It's all
I
thanks
think
to
so.
God. I don't think I've done much, too much. I've just kind of facilitated it.
So I didn't really know much about Nepal before I read your book, or the culture there, or the economy there. And one of the things that you just said, and I'm reminded of what I read, was when the husbands leave or the boyfriends leave, and there's no real resource for these women with children to collect child support. So from my reader perspective, I'm like, no, you are going to pay. This was a we problem here. How is that not the culture in Nepal? What do these women actually face that's different than, say, an American or a British person might face?
Well, a lot of them are undocumented, and there's no centralised tax system, because we would rely on somehow our national insurance number or our social security number to track down that man and to make him pay somehow, even if there's no communication between the two. But that doesn't exist in Nepal. The people are working for cash in hand, and when they don't work, they don't get any money. So if they're ill, for instance, or they had COVID just hit them so hard, they don't get any income. So there's no way of tracking down that man. If he wants to disappear, he can disappear.
So there really is no safety net.
No, there's no social services. No, there's no free healthcare or pensions or anything like that.
So 2004, you were looking for a purpose, and God plucked you out and started you on a purpose, and you had one small child, and then fast forward 19 years. Hold on, I wrote it down.
16 years.
Fast forward 16 years, 19 years to the book, 16 years to your second tour in Nepal. Talk to us about the difference of these 2 times living there, and both of you personally and with the ministry.
Yeah, so when we got the news, it was February 2020, so you can probably remember February 2020, we were all in a state of not knowing what was going to come our way a month later, were we? So I was super excited to be heading back to Nepal, and I expected to be useful and seeing all the ladies and so forth. And then March 2020, everything went crazy, didn't it? And I had to leave Alabama, where we were living, come back to the UK, the schools closed, and so our move to Nepal suddenly became this huge headache. And we were desperate to get there, but it was not easy. I ended up being, when we eventually left Alabama properly, so I came back for the school, but then we left again. To move to Nepal, I had to come via the UK because all the wives and dependents at the British camp had been evacuated back to the UK because of COVID. Simon had to go on without me. So by the time I finally reached Nepal and got through 2 weeks of quarantine in Nepal, just seeing the ladies was enough for me. I had nothing beyond that, because just being there was so incredible for me. But yeah, it was a tough year, 2020.
So let's now that we know about you and your background, and we should probably mention that in the time you had another child.
Yes.
Who's watching today.
Yes, she's got to go at some point, but yeah.
She's got to go.
Yeah, she's got a party to go to.
She's got things to do. All right. So in this time, obviously you're running this ministry and it's growing, and then God calls you to write the book. So talk to us about that calling to write this book.
Yeah, so I had already written a book and self-published that, and was increasingly feeling that I wanted to write. And in the intervening years where I wasn't living in Nepal, I had been visiting the ladies, and I was coming back every 2 years and seeing them. And I would spend, I'd go back for 10 days, and I'd spend perhaps half an hour with each woman, and we'd be rushing around, Esther and I, Kathmandu, and trying to see them all. And every time I visited the ladies, each 2 years, their stories would kind of change a little bit, and there'd be a new family member that they'd suddenly plucked from somewhere, and you think, oh, okay, I didn't know that about you. And actually that's in the book, because Maria in the book, she has 2 teenage children she has to leave behind in Solakumbu, and I had no idea they existed. And then Suki also, she has a daughter that was trafficked and ended up in a brothel in Delhi. And again, she never mentioned to us that she had this daughter until this daughter turned up. So I knew I wanted to spend longer with the women and get to the bottom of their stories and really find out in depth what was happening to them. But I knew I also wanted to share that with people and get more people praying and have more of a perspective and understanding of the ladies' experiences.
So I know the ministry has helped more than 12 women, but the book highlights 12 specific women. How did you choose those women to be in the book?
Okay, yeah, so when I got there, I had about 6 women that I was hoping to write about, and they had particular issues that I knew, were interesting really, although they're very sad. So one lady had leprosy, I knew I wanted to include her, and actually she'd written to me in the intervening years wanting to tell her story. There's the lady I mentioned with the daughter who was a trafficking victim. I knew that was an important story and I wanted to include that. Another lady, her house had been turned into a barracks. So there was a civil war essentially in Nepal, and the Maoists took over the country, and they would turn up at sort of landowners' houses in rural areas and make those people look after them and feed them. And so she was made to do that. So I had these sort of hot button issues, I suppose, that I wanted to include. And then the last 4 women I had no plans for, and I tried to interview some other ladies actually, and that fell through. But I ended up including Anju, who's really different, her story. She was, in Nepali terms, a millionaire, and then she lost it all. And in fact, she lost it twice. She became rich and then lost it, but rich and lost it. So I was so glad that I was led to include her in the book, because her story is really different. And then another lady worked in a brick kiln, and there's brick kilns everywhere in Nepal, so I was pleased to have included that really.
Great. So before we move into the next part of our interview, we need to know, how do we buy this book?
Okay, yes. So I've got copies you can buy from me. I'm in Belgium. I am coming to the UK soon for a tour. Jen in Huntsville, Alabama has 100 copies. I know she'll be glad if you can buy from her. Carol in Virginia, she has 50 copies to sell as well. And again, I think she'll be very glad if you can buy from her. If you're in the UK, then Eden Bookshop online is a great place to buy from. They're an independent Christian bookseller. And then finally, Amazon is where you can get it. And obviously, yeah, you can get a Kindle version on Amazon.
Great, wonderful. All right, now we are going to take a moment to hear from Anna's publisher.
Hi Rachel, thank you for chatting to me today. So I have 3 questions for you. First of all, I wanted to know what Authentic Media looks for when it chooses a book. Presumably you receive lots of manuscripts, so how do you decide which ones to publish?
Hi Anna. First of all, just want to say congratulations on your new book. Really pleased that it's now out, and I hope you enjoy your launch. Yes, so we do have lots of manuscripts coming, some better than others. So our main criteria is that it has to be Christ-centred. That is above everything else. If it doesn't fit into that, we don't even go any further, no matter how good the book might be. And secondly, it has to involve change. So it has to, for the reader, it has to either make a difference in their life in some way, so either encourage their spirituality, deepen their walk with God, point them to Jesus for the first time perhaps, or maybe challenge attitudes or encourage people to think through issues and have a deeper relationship with God. So something along those lines, but it has to do something for the reader. And then it also has to have something important to say. It's surprising how many manuscripts come in that don't really have anything unique to say, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for something that's different, that actually has something really unique and powerful to say in the manuscript. And then finally, if we get to a point where we think it might be good, then we always want to meet with the author and we want to work in partnership with authors. So it's really important that any book that we take on, that our passion and the author's passion align. So we want to work with authors that we can partner with, whose heart for their book is the same as ours, and that it's about kingdom ministry. So that kind of is the overall criteria that we work to.
And my second question then is, why did you decide to publish my book? I'm very grateful and I appreciate you doing that. So can you tell me and everybody else why you chose it, please?
So the short answer of why we took your book on is that it did all of those above things, in short. But really, the first time you just sent in a proposal form, which had some simple questions, and even from then we thought, this is something that could be really interesting. So even from that initial pitch, when you were talking about these women's lives and working in Nepal and the issues that women had and how God had intervened in their lives, felt like something that absolutely fitted into that criteria that we just talked about. And then when we got your sample chapters, I mean, to be honest, we were blown away from the minute we first read even those very first drafts. And I remember reading the introduction when you're just introducing the scene of Kathmandu and Nepal, and it was just so into the sights and sounds of it, you just felt like you was already there with you. And then you introduced these women, and we only had about 3 stories, I think, at this time. But just reading those stories, it was like, these are just amazing. It's like something we've never read before. The issues that you were talking about, it's like, no, we haven't heard about some of these things. And yet you were just so great in the way you teased out their stories and shown how God had changed their lives. So it was absolutely one of those books that absolutely felt that it was in our heartland of what we love to do. We love doing biographies and about changed lives. And this book absolutely fitted into it. We didn't have anything else on our list like it. And then we met up with you. It seems a long while ago now, but we did. And again, from our first talkings with you, you were so humble about what you were doing. You were so passionate and had such a heart for Jesus in all of this, and that you wanted these stories to be told for God's glory, and it just felt that we could work in partnership with you because we were both trying to do the same thing. So basically we took it on because we just thought it was a fantastic book that could really change lives, and we wanted to be a part of that with you.
And finally, I know you've read the book, so was there a story of a woman that particularly stood out for you and that you enjoyed and were impacted by?
I'm going to choose Lila, or Leela, I'm not quite sure the correct pronunciation, so apologies for getting that wrong. It's the first story in the book, and I've chosen it because it was the first one that I read, and its impact was that I wanted to publish the book because I'd read that one, so that's why I've chosen that one. And her story is about having leprosy, and in my naivety I kind of thought that leprosy is something that's kind of been and gone, not still sort of a live issue in the world, and impacts people so much still with this stigma and prejudice, and a story of being sort of 14 and contracting this and what that meant for her is heartbreaking, really. But I just loved her gumption, I suppose, and her spirit that she wasn't going to let it get the better of her, and she goes to hospital and she's determined to get it sorted. And I just, those stories of how God intervened even when she wasn't a Christian, but God was drawing her in and just helping her and moving her on in faith and moving her to him. There were some just incredible stories of just how God did that, and and even when she became a Christian, then she had all the persecution because she was a Christian in that culture, and again faced so many issues and everything. And yet, she'd found something precious, and she was willing to, as you call it, the evangelist. She was willing to evangelize and not count the cost. And again, those stories of when the authorities are chasing her, and it's like cat and mouse, and she just managed to escape and everything. It's just. Oh, she just seems the most amazing woman, and yet so many bad things have happened to her. Yet she wants to live her life to the glory of God, and that so shines through her story. And I say, when I read that, I thought, I want to help her tell her story. I want her to be able to show God's glory to lots more people. So that's why I've chosen that one.
Thank you so much for your time and for telling us more about your work and the book. Bye. More about your work and the book. Bye.
Great, that was wonderful. So let's talk a little bit more about these ladies and get a little bit more honest about some things. I feel like I was on The View right there for just 1 second. Do you guys know what The View is? Let's get a little honest about this. All right, so there are 12 stories of ladies who have had a lot of hardship. And as I'm reading these stories, of course, like your publisher said, I was very compelled by their circumstances in life. I was angered by some of the things that I read. But I also had a sense of relief that this is not my life. So how do people like me reconcile those feelings of glad I'm not there? That's really awful. I'm glad that I'm here. How do people like me reading this book reconcile that?
Yeah, so that was my question really in 2004 when I arrived in Nepal. I came there very privileged with Simon at the British camp and was trying to make sense of everything that I was experiencing around me. So I think you can kind of take it from two views. When I've studied international development since then, and development you can either view as giving people more money and raising their living standards through that, or you can see it as a rights issue. So you're helping people get their right to clean water, or their rights to an education. And so development, we'll spend a lot of time talking about these two. But as I prayed a lot more, I wanted to give these ladies Christian development, if you like, and I very much saw that as experiencing for them the fruits of the Spirit. So the love, the joy, the peace, kindness, self-control, I wanted them to receive that from other people. So where they'd been abused, somebody had been nasty to them, instead of that I wanted them to have joy and kindness. And that became part of our mission statement for the charity, and I hope it kind of become a bit of a mission statement for me. That's how I want to see the women flourish, and to come on. So I'm not. So that doesn't mean that I can't be wealthy and a Westerner, if you see what I mean, because everybody, and if you're poor, you can still be like that. So that's a sort of all-encompassing view of development, I guess. And then thinking specifically about how you can get involved. I have written the previous book to this, and it's exactly that, asking God to say, what thing do you want me to do? You know, there's all these needs in the world, but how are you involving me? And actually I've written a YouVersion Bible Bible plan that went out this week, and that's on the same question, looking at the Good Samaritan, because the Good Samaritan kind of had it easy. He just had one person to look after. It's kind of obvious that he should look after that person, and I think it's not the same for us. We have all these women, and there's other issues in other countries, but if we can somehow boil it down to one issue and ask God to give us one issue, that makes it a lot easier.
And so what would you say is a calling for people who find themselves in a position to help?
If you're in a position to help, then I think it's really good to identify people who are helping already and learn from them, see some good practice and join in what they're doing. And it might be that you work alongside them, or you and you stay like that, or you work alongside them for a bit and then you duplicate that and do that somewhere else or in a slightly different circumstance. But I think working together is always a good way to do it. So obviously I learned so much from Eileen. Eileen's just been this incredible influence, and she's inspired so many. Heike is visiting me at the moment, she'll be on later, and she was a missionary there for many years. But we can both point to Eileen and her influence, and Eileen set up leprosy hospitals, all sorts, and Women Without Roofs wasn't just the only thing that she set up.
And where did you take that initial vision and setup from Eileen, and what have you done with it? Where have you gone with it?
Well, I had to move house with it. So we came back to the UK after, or just 2 years in Nepal. So it was very informal when I lived in Nepal. I was just helping these 10 people. And then I went back to Devon and met a trustee there, somebody who, Rini, she may be watching. She's in Nepal right now, but she is from Devon. She was just retired and she was starting to spend 6 months a year in Nepal, so she was one of the first trustees, and then I got a few other trustees involved as well. We registered the charity in the UK, and then when I went over to America we managed to register it there as a non-profit as well. So yeah, and then in Nepal it just slowly, organically kept growing, and the ladies had friends that needed help. We found some pastors who would refer women to us. So it's kind of grown at the same speed in Nepal as it's grown outside of Nepal, and God's been very good. As we've had more needs, He's provided more money, and you know, we've never had too much, but we've never had too little either.
Right. So could you share with us one story of how God changed one of the women's lives in the book that was really impactful to you?
Yeah, so the lady that's really impacted me was Maria. I think she's chapter 8 in the book. And she grew up in a remote area called Kathmandu. And she has had 3 kind of husbands. The first one she had when she was a teenager, and that was just an arranged marriage, and she had to get married, I think, about the age of 12. And that didn't last because obviously it was arranged, and I don't think either of them wanted to be in that marriage. And then she fell in love with another man who, when she was about 17 or 18, and I think they were attracted to each other, if you see what I mean. And he was a Christian.
No, I don't understand that. Could you explain a little bit more?
Well, you've got Ryan here.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, well,
so 17,
yeah, so she left her first husband, and he tried to kill her. You know, he wasn't happy at that, although, you know, obviously I don't think he wanted the marriage either, but anyway. And then this nice husband that she met, she had 2 children with him, but then he got cancer, so by the age of 25, she'd lost him. And then in Nepali society, they believe in this idea of karma, that you get what you deserve. So if a woman loses her husband, she is blamed for that, and she is seen as unlucky, and she's ostracized from the wider community, which is just tragic, because it's the opposite of our society. If somebody loses someone in our society, we rush to them, we try to help them, and we give them food and whatever, but she was just ostracized. So she became a bit of an outcast in her village. And then another man saw that and started harassing her, and eventually he raped her more than once. She had to work in the far outskirts of the village in paddy fields she was working in, and he would just get her alone in these paddy fields, and he raped her. So eventually she became pregnant, and when the village elders found out about this, their solution to that was to make her marry him, or him to take her into his house, because that's the only way to make him responsible, and for him to support that child. But of course she moved in and he carried on abusing her. I mean, it's going to be like that. And she moved in with his parents, her in-laws, and they abused her too, because they were all like that. So she ran away from them eventually. But this whole idea that someone can be forced to marry a man that's raped them was just so upsetting to me, and just such a reverse of any sense of justice I have, I think. So that's inspired me really to find other victims of rape, and I want to write another book after this, and it will be focused on women that have been forced to marry their rapists, because sadly she's not the only one.
So the woman you're talking about now, we just heard her synopsis of her terrible story.
Yes, read the book.
But you didn't find her at the end at that point. You got to know her because of the ministry. Jesus brought her to your ministry.
Yes.
So speak about how Jesus is redeeming these women's lives?
Yeah, so with her or?
Sure, with her.
Well, in her case, she was a Christian, and somebody from her church in remote Solakumbu had moved to Kathmandu and was attending a church in Kathmandu, and that's where Hitu in the book went to church. And Hitu was a woman that we supported through Women Without Roots, but we invited her to work for us. And when we opened a women's home in 2011, Hitu came to the women's home to run it, and she organised all the cooking and the cleaning, and was generally in charge. So Maria found out, I'm getting photos taken, Maria found out in Solakumbu that there was a women's home opening in Kathmandu, and she walked 3 days with her baby to get the bus to get to Kathmandu. And then when she finally reached Kathmandu, she had to get another bus out to the women's home because we were in a remote area. And it was just the celebration that day, that was our opening celebration. And she turned up for the celebration and stayed for 7 years.
Oh, wow.
Because she just felt it was the right place to be, the right place for her to be. So yeah, it was incredible that our plans back in London, we had meetings in London, I remember, with the trustees and the landlord of this property met us in London. We were making these plans, and yet all the distance in Solakumbu, which is so remote, she knew that this was happening, and she was able to get herself to the women's home.
It's wonderful. Now we're going to take a minute and listen to a song written by one of the women who live in the ministry houses and has a chapter in the book.
This is Anita singing her song from the book.
दलदलेमा परेको बेला ख्रिस्टले पार्नु भोलौ फेला उल्काइ गर्यो नि येशू ख्रिस्टको अमूल्य रगतले सँगै पार्यो नि उल्काइ गर्यो नि येशू ख्रिस्टको अमूल्य रगतले सँगै पार्यो नि खोज्दै थिएँ म आफ्नो आफन्त येशूजी नै नजिक भो सफन्द उल्काइ गर्यो नि येशू ख्रिस्टको अमूल्य रगतले सँगै पार्यो नि उल्काइ गर्यो नि येशू ख्रिस्टको अमूल्य रगतले सँगै पार्यो नि हातमा काटी पाउमा काटी कति दया गर्नु भो म माथि उल्काइ गर्यो नि येशू ख्रिस्टको अमूल्य रगतले सँगै पार्यो नि उल्काइ गर्यो नि येशू ख्रिस्टको अमूल्य रगतले सँगै पार्यो नि उद्धार गर्यो म जस्तो पापीलाई धन्यवाद छ ख्रिस्टले सुराजालाई उल्काइ गर्यो नि येशू ख्रिस्टको अमूल्य रगतले सँगै पार्यो नि उल्काइ गर्यो नि येशू ख्रिस्टको अमूल्य रगतले सँगै पार्यो नि अबदेखि म सधैँ आउँछु येशूको खबर सबैलाई सुनाउँछु उल्काइ गर्यो नि येशू ख्रिस्टको अमूल्य रगतले सँगै पार्यो नि उल्काइ गर्यो नि येशू ख्रिस्टको अमूल्य रगतले सँगै पार्यो नि म गर्दिन संसारमा अलमल्ल येशूको माया मनभरि झलमल्ल उल्काइ गर्यो नि येशू ख्रिस्टको अमूल्य रगतले सँगै पार्यो नि उल्काइ गर्यो नि येशू ख्रिस्टको अमूल्य रगतले सँगै पार्यो नि धन्यवाद।
Tehdään tänne vaat.
सँगै पार्यो नि भनेर
Tehdään tänne vaat.
Wonderful. So when I first listened to this and watched the video so I could know what was being said, this line stood out to me in the song. I was searching for my relatives. I found Jesus nearer than anyone else. So this statement struck me because anybody who has come to know the Lord understands finding a new home, a new family, a new relatives. So that idea, and then throughout the book, there's so much being pushed away from family by the families in the book, not accepting them for one reason or another. So can you speak to how your ministry, and in particular Jesus, has connected these women to a new family with all the women in your houses?
So I think Women Without Roofs, in a very broad sense, sees itself as kind of replacing the role that the husband would do if he was still there with the woman. So just providing that security, and obviously if the husband was there, it would be double income, they would have more income. But so we fill in that role of providing money, but it goes much further than that, because some of our ladies have been thrown out of their homes. There've been awful landlords who abuse them if they don't pay their rent. So because we are providing that rent for them, they are secure. They know that that is not going to happen to them. And if there is any threat of that happening, they can come to us. Mm. And then the two women's homes that we run, obviously the women there are getting fellowship and support. But the women most of the women we support are in their own rooms. And when they collect the rent and medical bills that we provide money for, they come to the women's home. So they get to see everyone, and it's usually a bit of a chat, and they have a cup of tea and sit and catch up on all the gossip, and it's quite loud and raucous at those times because they tend to come together. Very quiet, obviously, but it was COVID, we obeyed all the rules. But so there is that fellowship there, and then we are able to organise other events for them. So they had a picnic all together last week, and they were playing funny games, silly games, like feeding each other bananas and things. So we're just able to give them this sense of family, I think, that they are lacking and missing, but also standing up for them. We employ a lawyer now as well, just on a part-time basis, because this lawyer is so busy actually, and it's hard to get one. But we're advocating for them. We're trying to give them that voice that you would also have, I think, if you had in that culture. If you have a man, you have a voice. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to reconcile with that. Yeah.
So you're speaking of this lawyer. Mm-hmm. I don't know if everyone here or watching online understands that as a woman, you cannot, or the citizenship issue and the property ownership. Could you talk a little bit about that reality for these ladies?
Yeah, so citizenship's really tough for them to get it. So if you don't have citizenship, you can't own any land, you can't vote, obviously, and then you can't work for the government. And the heaps of their local industries, like the bus company, for instance, is a government-run organisation in Nepal. So if you haven't got citizenship, it cuts off all these job opportunities that you might have. So citizenship is just so vitally important for them. So the law was changed in the 90s. A woman can now go to her local office and get citizenship, but in practice she can't. Usually the man, sadly, in the citizenship office will just refuse to talk to her because she's not there with her husband or her brother, and they don't believe her word where she says she was born or wherever. So that's been a real struggle for us, because those women are the most vulnerable that don't have citizenship. You better your life if you do manage to obtain citizenship. So we would love to do more to help them get citizenship.
Thank you. It's just such a different reality than so many of us on this side of it. So now we're about to meet Saru. She helped to translate for the book in Nepal, and she speaks of a patriarchal society where women what we just were talking about, where women really can't make their own decisions. Which obviously doesn't sit well with me. And so let's listen to this interview.
Jai Masi Saru, तपाईँ कस्तो हुनुहुन्छ?
जयमसी आना म एकदम राम्रो छु तपाई कस्तो हुनुहुन्छ
Yeah, my Santo too. Danubad, thank you so
Yes.
much for meeting with us today and for sharing your thoughts on the book. It's really lovely to see you all the way from Kathmandu.
Oh yeah, so I'm also happy to see you again and share
Great.
something about Nepali women's
Yeah,
story. Yeah.
sure. So you are in chapter 6 of the book where you share your story of going through COVID. You also translated for me for about 10 of the ladies, I think. And you serve on the committee of Women Without Roofs Nepal. So you're
Yes.
still involved in everything that's going on in Nepal. So
Yeah.
first of all, let me ask you about your COVID. You had a serious bout of COVID, and I write about it in the book. You ended up in hospital and we nearly lost you. So how are you doing now?
Anna, I'm okay now. My health is good and no problem. No any health problem. Now I'm recovered from that COVID.
Wonderful. I'm really relieved to hear that. So next question then, why did you want to help me tell the story of Nepal's women to the wider world?
Okay, so I want to share Nepali Christian women's life to the people of the world because I'm Nepali and I know their inner struggle and how they are facing in their life. So I helped you. So I want to say that Nepal is a patriarchal society and it is not easy for women to take any important decision by themselves. To believe in Jesus, still they have to face many challenges from their family and society. Before some years ago, it was very hard to take decision to follow Jesus. At that time, who accepted Jesus as their savior. Some women were beaten, some women were thrown away from home, and they had many struggles. Despite of this, now in every Nepali church, the number of women believers are more than men. Due to lack of education, finance, and skill, Nepali Christian women have struggled in their life, but they have strong faith in Jesus. So please pray for our Nepali women as well as Christian women, so they can grow spiritually and financially, and in every sector of their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wonderfully put. Yeah, I pray for that too, for them to flourish in every area of their lives and to have strong faith. They need all the encouragement really that they can get. Yeah, really good.
Thank you.
Is there a particular woman or a story that impacted you and that has had a lasting impression on you?
Okay, so every woman to whom we met, their stories and their life really encouraged me. But one particular woman, she is, her name is Anju, and who was a successful business woman. At that time, when she was in success, she refused to accept Jesus and she was against the Christians. But unfortunately, her husband suffered from cancer and she also lost her health and she lost everything on the treatment of her husband. And at that time, she decided to go to the church, and in Jesus, she found hope. So at that, from that time, she followed Jesus and she accepted Jesus as her savior. And from that day, she started to pray for others and for herself. So now she became the prayer warrior. And sometimes I go to visit her and we pray together for
many issues, and at her areas now she's the leader to lead other women's in prayer, and now she became prayer warrior, and from her life I learned many things. We can lost or lose everything, but if Jesus is in our side, we can do everything, all things. So I'm so inspired by her life.
That is wonderful to hear, and I'm so glad that you continue to meet up with her. You didn't know each other before, I think, and now you have become friends and encourage each other. So that's wonderful fruit from this.
Yeah.
Great.
Now we became so good friend, and so if we can't meet each other, we call each other and ask prayer issues, and we pray for each other.
Wonderful. Well, that's lovely. I'm encouraged by that just on its own. So thank you for your time and for sharing your thoughts about the book. We are praying for you here, and it's just been great to see you. So, Daimasi.
Okay, Anna, and thank you for this opportunity you have given me, and I hope this book will impact many people, and yeah, धन्यवाद.
धन्यवाद. फेरि भेटौँला.
हजुर, फेरि भेटौँला. जय मसीह. Yeah, धन्यवाद.
धन्यवाद. फेरि भेटौँला.
हजुर, फेरि भेटौँला. जय मसीह.
All right. So as we are nearing the end of our time together, we have a couple of questions to ask from our online audience. The first question is, where did you get your sweater, Jessica? I got this from the PX in Castau. Is that where it is? No. Where is the PX? Yeah, I'm not saying that word. I got this at the PX in Belgium. The first question is, where do you see your ministry going from here, moving forward? What's your vision for the next phase of your ministry?
Gosh, that's a tough question. But actually, I do have an answer, because this came to me last night. I sort of felt I had to share it. I would love to see a ministry going up to find the mothers of human trafficking victims up in the hills of Nepal. So it's estimated that between 12 and 15,000 girls, and they're teenagers, they're 13 and 14-year-olds that are taken generally and trafficked to brothels in India every year. So I'm guessing there's probably 100,000 mothers who are missing them, and just like Suki in the book, are crying themselves to sleep and not knowing where their daughters are. And I would love to go out and find those mothers, because Suki didn't tell us that she had a daughter that was missing. There's so much shame associated with that, but I'd love to be involved somehow in reaching out to those mothers, but I don't have any firm plans on that at the moment.
And from Priya, your daughter, what was it like writing a book? What were some of the challenges of writing a book?
Yeah, well, I enjoyed meeting the women, and I would generally interview them for about 3 or 4 hours. That's enough for about 5,000 words. Each chapter is about 5,000 words. I would get quite engrossed in it, and particularly if they had a very difficult story, it would bring me down as I wrote it. So I could usually write those 5,000 words in about 10 days. And during that 10 days, my mind would be with them, I think. So it was hard in that sense. But overall, I love the writing process. I mean, I was okay being down. I was okay being in the story, but obviously I had to function with other people in my life. So it's bad for them, but good for me.
And what was your favorite part of Nepali culture?
Well, I love living in Kathmandu. Kathmandu is just vibrant and a capital city, and there's so many places to go and people to see, and it's warm. Yeah, we have a great standard of living while we're over there. So, yeah, the people are lovely to us. I think that's the contrast, though, because the people are so lovely towards us, but I know that within their own families, things are much more difficult and different. But, yeah, I love Nepal. Yeah, I like the warm.
Yeah. As opposed to the cold.
As opposed to the cold and rainy.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So, oh, there are more? There are more questions? All right. Oh, coming through from Alabama. Where is the closest Waffle House? So why would you ask that? Let's see. This is the question from Alabama. As Americans, we can live a sheltered life. How could we get involved in Women Without Roofs and also expand our worldview?
Yeah, so obviously read the book.
Yeah, step one.
That one. I do mention it in there. There's a film called I Am Bel Maya about Nepal, and that is just so fantastic. It's a Nepali woman who's filmed herself over maybe 5 years, filming her life and just ordinary, everyday things. But that film is such a good insight into what women's lives are like in Nepal. It's everything in her room, like the bucket and the bedspread, is the same as all the ladies that I meet and chat to. So if you can watch that film, search for it online, I Am Bel Maya. What was the question? Americans.
Well, so the cultural part, but also specifically, how do we get involved in your ministry?
Yes, okay. So if there is a website, so you can give, obviously, online. I would love it if people would pray. I think in terms of awareness, that's why I wrote the book. I wanted people to pray, and not praying through a sense of obligation, but praying through a sense of love for these women and the women that they represent. So yeah, the website, that's the place to give if you're talking about giving.
Great. And I think it's also important to mention in the back of your book that you do have references, places where you can learn more and serve in that way.
Other NGOs I mentioned.
Yeah. So, is there anything else you would like to say as we get to the closing of our time together?
Well, which story of a lady impacted you, Jessica?
I told her to ask me that. So I had an answer until last night when I finished the last 2 chapters. I was going to say something profound and deep, but you did that enough, so I'm not going to say that. Instead, I found a person not named in, side note, Anna thought my favorite story was the one entitled Winner, because I'm American. So, and she was right, that was my favorite one at first. But this is my new one. It's in the story entitled Runners.
Yes, the mother and daughter.
It was a mother and daughter, but the character, you've given this person 2 lines that Raya is the mother, or is she the daughter?
Daughter.
Raya is the daughter, but this line is that she has a friend who is confident and brash, and that even though Raya is shy herself, God has given her a sassy friend who stood up for her and protected her from someone who was trying to do something bad to her. And so for all of us people out there who might have a little trouble with writing a book or getting involved in a ministry in maybe a traditional way, you can always be the sassy friends who helps out and keeps people away, keep the bad away. So,
very wise words.
All right. So that's my favorite person. Now we're going to meet another one of Anna's friends who's come all the way from Germany.
Are there more questions?
Are there more questions? All the way from... Anyone in the room? No. We're going to... That was my quick censoring. So we're going to meet another friend of Anna's who came all the way from Germany, and that sounds like all the way from Germany, but we live in Europe, so it is still far enough. So please welcome Heike to come pray for us.
Yeah, I think we're praying for this one. So Heike, I mentioned earlier that I worked or volunteered 1 morning a week, I think, at the National Public Health Laboratory when I lived in Nepal the first time. And Heike was there. She runs a lab, I guess, and was a missionary in Nepal for very many years. So she speaks Nepali and German and English, and I've asked her to pray in those 3 languages for this book, and she's going to do that now. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's pray. Lieber Vater im Himmel, ich bete dafür, dass aus der Veröffentlichung der Geschichten in diesem Buch keine negativen Folgen entstehen für die Frauen, die ihre Geschichte geteilt haben. Bitte, Vater, bewahre diese 12 Frauen und ihre Kinder auch in Zukunft. Ani hamro swarga pita, parmeswalai, hami binti gartacho. Ini harulai asistil. Viशेष गरी यिनी 12 जना दिदीबहिनीहरूलाई आशिष दिउन् र सँगसँगै सबै नेपाली आमा दिदीबहिनीहरूलाई सुरक्षित राख्नुहोस् अनि आशिष दिनुहोस्. Dear God, we thank you for this book and the 12 stories that Anna has been able to compile in it. I pray that the book will inspire many who read it into praying for these women in Nepal. May there also be those who get called to action and help to change the situation of women in Nepal for the better. Please, Father, use this book for your own purpose. Amen.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And the book is launched.